There are roads out there that do more than just get you from A to B. They test you. They chew you up and spit you out if you don't show respect. The stretch of US 95 that cuts through the gut of Nevada, somewhere between Tonopah and Vegas, is one of those roads. The sun there isn't your friend, it's a hammer. They call that part of the state the Big Empty, and for good reason. The first time I saw it, I thought it was a mirage. Standing alone, maybe 100 yards off the shoulder, was a tree. Not a Joshua tree or some hardy scrub brush. A proper tree. Except it was dead. A skeleton. But the strangest thing was what was at its base. Dozens, maybe hundreds of bottles and jugs of water glinting in the sun. That night, I pulled into a truck stop in Beatty. I mentioned the tree to an old-timer named Sal. He stopped stirring his chili and looked at me, his eyes serious. "You leave it something?" I laughed. "Leave what? It's a dead tree." He shook his head slowly. "That ain't just a tree, son. That's a toll booth. We call it the thirsty tree, or sometimes the sun-baked saint."
He told me the legend then, in that low, gravelly voice old truckers get. The story goes that the tree isn't really dead. It's just waiting, and it's always thirsty. If you drive past and you have water to spare, you stop. You walk out there and you leave a bottle at its roots, an offering, a sign of respect. And if you don't, I asked, still smirking. Sal's face didn't change. If you don't, he said, the tree gets its water one way or another. The bottle you got in your cab, it'll go dry. Your canteen, your cooler, everything. And then when your throat starts to feel like you've been swallowing sand, your engine starts to cough, your fuel gauge drops like a stone. The tree takes your water, and the desert takes the rest. I scoffed. It was a good story, a folk tale born from heat stroke. I thanked Sal for the story, paid for my coffee, and forgot all about it. I was a modern man, driving a 500 horsepower machine of logic and engineering. I didn't have time for hocus pocus. But the image of those bottles, like offerings at a forgotten shrine, stuck with me.
Months went by. Then came the run to Reno. It was a hot load, meaning the schedule was tight. But everything that could go wrong did go wrong. A flat tire, a weigh station inspection, a traffic jam at Vegas. By the time I hit that long, empty stretch of 95, I was 12 hours behind schedule and running on fumes. I had one bottle of water left, rolling around on a passenger seat. The sun was a merciless white disk in the sky. I saw it from a mile away, the thirsty tree. I could see the glint of the bottles at its base. A part of my tired mind whispered, "Stop. Just for a minute. It's just a bottle of water." But the other part of my brain, the one that was stressed and late and logical, screamed louder, "Don't be an idiot. You need that water. Stopping will cost you 5 minutes you don't have. It's a dead piece of wood with some trash around it." My hand hovered over the Jake brake. Just keep driving, the logical part of me won. Deadlines are real. Curses are not. I tightened my grip on the wheel, pushed the accelerator a little harder, and my rig thundered past the lonely Sentinel. To prove to myself how stupid it was, I grabbed my last bottle of water. I twisted the cap, lifted it to my lips, and took a long, deep drink. The water was crisp and cold. I screwed the cap back on, set the half-full bottle in the cup holder, and focused on the road ahead. For the next hour, everything was normal. I felt a little smug. See? Just a silly story. My throat started to feel dry. Again. I reached for the bottle in the cup holder. My fingers closed around it. It felt light? Too light. I glanced down. The bottle was empty. Not just empty. It was bone dry. Not a single drop. It was as if the water had simply vanished. My logical brain kicked in. Did it leak? I ran my hand over the cup holder, the seat, the floor mat, all perfectly dry. Did I drink it all and not realize it? No,
I couldn't have. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I tried to focus on the road, but my eyes kept flicking to my dashboard gauges. Oil pressure? Normal. Engine temp? Fine. And the fuel gauge. The needle was on a quarter tank. I had checked it 20 minutes ago and it was just under the halfway mark. It didn't burn fuel that fast. Not ever. It was impossible.
The smugness was gone, replaced by a creeping, chilling dread. The empty water bottle wasn't a mistake. The fuel gauge wasn't broken. This was happening. The words of old Sal echoed in my head. The tree gets its water one way or another. Then your engine starts to cough. The cab suddenly felt smaller. I turned on the radio, desperate for a human voice. All I got was static, a harsh, whispering hiss that sounded like sand blowing across rock. My fuel gauge was now visibly, steadily dropping, and my thirst was becoming an agony. Panic is a cold, sharp thing. I eased off the accelerator, trying to conserve every last drop of fuel. The landscape outside now seemed hostile, predatory. The engine coughed. It was a small, sputtering sound, but in the silence of my terror, it was as loud as a gunshot. It coughed again, longer this time. The reassuring roar of the diesel faltered, dropping to a sick, rattling gasp. The red, empty light on the dash flickered on, and then, with a final shudder that ran through the entire frame of the rig, the engine died.
The silence was the most terrifying thing I have ever experienced. My 18-wheeler was now just a massive, useless hunk of metal cooking in the Nevada sun. I was stranded. I tried the CB radio. Static. No cell service, of course. The thirst was no longer just a discomfort. It was a physical pain. My tongue felt thick and swollen. I got out of the cab and the heat hit me like a solid wall. I stood on the shoulder of that empty highway and looked around. Nothing. I was a tiny speck in a vast, indifferent wilderness. Despair is a heavy blanket. I sank to my knees on the hot asphalt, my head spinning. I thought about the water I had refused to give. That half a bottle. It seemed like an ocean now. In the delirium of the heat, I swear I could hear a sound on the wind, a dry, rustling whisper that sounded like dead leaves or a thirsty throat. I looked back down the highway. The heat waves made the road dance, but I imagined I could see it, a tiny gray spike on the horizon, the tree, and I knew, with the certainty that went deeper than logic, that it was watching me, waiting.
I don't know how long I was out there. Time melts in that kind of heat. My world had shrunk to the searing sun, the burning in my lungs, and a thirst so profound it felt like my whole body was turning to dust. I was found by a kid driving a beat-up flatbed. He found me curled up by the tires, barely conscious. The first thing I remember is the glorious, life-giving agony of cool water trickling down my throat. As he opened me into his cab, he didn't ask what happened. He just said, with a quiet certainty, "You passed the thirsty tree, didn't you? And you didn't stop." I just nodded, too weak to speak. My truck was towed to the next town. The mechanic found nothing wrong with it. But the tank, he said, was the driest he had ever seen. Bone dry. The next time I had to make the run to Reno, I bought a whole case of water. When I saw the tree's skeletal form, I felt a kind of reverence. I pulled over and walked out into the heat. I placed not one, but 6 bottles of fresh, clean water at its roots. Sorry about last time, I whispered to the silent wood. My mistake.
As I walked back to my truck, I didn't look back. But as I pulled away, I glanced in my side mirror. Maybe it was just a trick of the heat, a shimmer in the air. But for a split second, the dead gray tree didn't look quite so dead. It was just a feeling, but it was enough. So now I'm the old-timer at the truck stop, telling the story to some rookie who thinks he knows better. I tell them about the big empty, about the sun-baked saint that stands guard over it. I tell them it's not about superstition, it's about respect.
respect for the road, for the desert, and for the things you don't understand. And I always end with the same piece of advice. If you ever find yourself on that lonely stretch of Nevada highway and you see that single thirsty tree, just pay the toll. Believe me, a bottle of water is a small price to pay.